something involving delivering organic food for pets or subscription boxes of healthy produce. Rachel wasn't entirely sure. My parents went around asking various relatives for money, but almost everyone turned them down. The only relative who offered to help was my Uncle Derek, a known loan shark, and not even my parents were that desperate. One Saturday, Rachel and I met for coffee, and she filled me in. "So," she asked, eyeing me carefully, "what do you think about them asking for yet another loan to fund Bart's new scheme?" I stirred my latte, taking my time to respond. 6 months ago, I would have been overcome with worry. 3 months ago, I'd have been furious. Now, it's not my circus, not my monkeys, I said calmly, and realized I genuinely meant it. Rachel smiled. "You seem different," she commented. "Happier." I thought of my new apartment, how I'd celebrated my recent promotion with my coworkers instead of my family, and how I finally had time to take the weekend cooking classes I'd always wanted. "I am," I answered. "I really am." That evening, I settled onto my sofa in my new place with a glass of wine, reflecting on everything that had transpired. Mom's words drifted back to me. Family helps family, but they had forgotten. That help is supposed to be mutual, that love isn't one-sided, and that family should be about supporting each other's progress, not enabling someone else's spiraling mistakes. I took another sip and smiled to myself. I had far better things to do than try to save people who refuse to be saved. Much better things indeed. My next phone call was to a moving company that specialized in same-day relocations. I didn't care about the extra fee. While waiting for the movers, I walked through Mom's property, my soon-to-be ex-apartment, placing sticky notes on every item I'd paid for myself. "That gray couch is mine. The dining table and chairs are mine. All the kitchen appliances except for the stove and fridge are mine. The built-in shelves that I installed come with me." One by one, everything that I had purchased was flagged. By the time the movers arrived at 2 in the afternoon, I was ready to direct traffic like a conductor. The coffee maker I'd bought after my promotion, the memory foam mattress I'd snagged on Black Friday, the TV I'd mounted using YouTube tutorials, everything went into boxes and onto the truck. By the end of the day, the apartment looked almost exactly as I had first found it. Empty walls, bare floors, and that ancient sofa left sitting in the middle of the living room like a doomed ship's captain going down with it. I took a final look around, remembering all the Saturdays I had spent painting those walls, all the late nights scrubbing floors and searching for the perfect lamps. Then I slipped the keys into an envelope, left them on the counter, and headed to my new place. That same night, I stayed up late organizing everything in my new home. It felt exhilarating, like a fresh start. It wasn't until the next morning that everything blew up. The calls began at 7 a.m. First Mom, then Bart, then Sarah, then Mom again. I let the phone buzz on the granite countertop in my new kitchen while I sipped a fresh cup of coffee from my own machine. When the phone rang for the 6th time, I picked it up. "How dare you?" Mom's voice nearly shook my eardrums. "The apartment is empty. Bart and Sarah have nowhere to sleep except that old sofa. You had no right to take everything." "Actually, I did," I said, strangely calm. "I bought it all with my own money and I have the receipts to prove it. I left that ancient sofa, the one that was there when I moved in. Surely that should please you." There was silence before Mom unleashed an insult so strong that Grandma Helen, had she been alive, would have washed out her mouth with soap. Then she hung up. Within 30 minutes, my phone was bombarded by text messages. Bart and Sarah hurled every name in the book at me. Vengeful witch, petty, resentful, selfish, soulless corporate robot who knows nothing about family loyalty. I read them once and closed the messaging app without replying. Instead of jumping into their chaos, I devoted myself to setting up my new apartment, placing furniture where I wanted, hanging pictures, and basically enjoying a newfound sense of peace. A month passed without further contact. I'd love to say I never thought about them, but that would be untrue. Occasionally, I wondered how they were managing, whether they had found some furniture, whether Mom was still making her famous lasagna on Sundays. Yet whenever I felt that hang of nostalgia, I pushed it away. They'd made their choice. Exactly a month later, Mom called again. I nearly ignored it, but curiosity got the best of me. "The rent hasn't been paid," she said curtly, with a note of accusation in her voice. "Of course not," I replied. "I don't live there anymore, remember? You forced me out. That's not the point," Mom snapped. "We expected you to keep paying. Bart and Sarah can't handle the rent now. The family needs your help." Letting out a disbelieving laugh, I tightened my grip on the phone. "Hold on. Let me get this straight. You kicked me out so Bart and his wife could stay free of charge, and now you expect me to keep paying rent for a place I no longer occupy? Families take care of each other," Mom shouted as though it were obvious. "Don't you see how bad things are for your brother right now? We still owe that bank loan. phone. And Bart can't pay rent until he bounces back. I felt something crack inside me. So that's your understanding of family? You push one child aside to make space for the other, and then you demand money from the one you displaced? You said, the family helps the family, remember? Well, guess what? That's exactly what you didn't do for me. A deafening hush filled the line. When Mom finally spoke, her tone was frigid. I'm very disappointed in you, Amber. That's funny, I said, a bitter edge creeping into my voice. I was about to tell you the same thing. I ended the call and immediately blocked her number, then Dad's, then Bart's, then Sarah's. I also blocked them on every messaging app and social media platform I used. It was like ripping off a limb, but at least I could breathe freely. Weeks passed, then months. Through my cousin Rachel, who had always been kind to me, I learned bits of family news. Bart apparently had another brilliant idea. We were on track to expand, but then those mega corporate vultures swooped in with all their fancy technology and endless funds. They probably spent millions on marketing, Sarah added, pushing her food around her plate. How is a small business supposed to compete with that? Exactly. Bart slammed his hand against the table, rattling the glasses. They're bullies with bigger wallets. And don't even get me started on those clueless bankers who refuse to extend our credit line. A bunch of nitwits with no eye for opportunity. Maybe, I ventured, my voice careful but firm. That's just how competition works. If you start a business, you've got to plan for competition. A sudden hush fell over the table. 4 pairs of eyes stared at me as if I'd just proposed we eat gravel for dinner. Plan? Bart retorted with a snort. Easy for you to say. Stuck in your comfy office routine. You don't know the first thing about running a real company. I opened my mouth to argue, but Dad shot me a warning glance. Resigned, I poked at my peas, lining them up in rows. Then Sarah sighed dramatically. I can't stand living here much longer, she announced, her tone clearly insulted by the modest accommodations. No offense, she added, though she didn't sound sorry at all, but I need my own space. Bart perked up, as if someone had flipped a switch on his back. Hey, Mom, what about Grandma Helen's old apartment? That's still in the family, right? My head whipped up so fast I thought I might strain my neck. I live there, I interjected quickly, and I've spent months fixing it up. Oh, right, Mom said, suddenly animated. Amber's done such a gorgeous job renovating it. I saw Bart and Sarah exchange a quick telling glance. My stomach twisted, but I tried to shrug it off. They wouldn't dare, I told myself. That Wednesday, I was heading home from work, brainstorming what to cook for dinner, when I came to a dead stop in front of my apartment door. I could hear familiar voices coming from inside. Letting myself in, I found Mom, Bart, and Sarah in my living room, looking around as though it belonged to them. Sarah was stroking the new curtains I had hung just a month earlier. Mom, I said, trying to keep my tone even. What's going on? You could have at least given me a call to say you were coming. Mom waved a hand dismissively. Don't be ridiculous, Amber. This apartment is mine. I don't need permission to visit. My mouth went dry. Something in her voice set off warning bells in my head. I watched as Sarah continued her inspection like a realtor evaluating a property. She ran a finger along the brand new kitchen counter I'd had installed, poked her head into the freshly painted bathroom, and nodded approvingly at the shelves I'd mounted in the living room. Finally, she settled onto the couch, an older piece I'd kept from before the renovation, and flashed that cat-like grin of hers. This is perfect, she said. We can move in next week. My world spun. Excuse me? This is my home. I live here. I'm the one who pays rent. I spent months and thousands of dollars to fix it up. But I'm the owner, Mommy interrupted in an unyielding tone, and I decide who gets to live in my property. But all the work I did, I gestured at the beautifully redone walls, the refinished floors, all the hours I'd poured in. I transformed this place. Yes, Mom replied, smiling in a way that made me uneasy. And thanks to you, its market value has gone up quite a bit. So if you'd like to stay, you'll be paying triple what you're currently paying. I felt ice in my veins. So this was your plan. You're trying to force me out. Mom gave a slight shrug. If you can't handle the new price, you'd better find somewhere else. You have 1 week to move. Without waiting for my response, they headed to the door. Sarah was already on her phone, presumably making moving arrangements, and Bart simply stared at the floor, saying nothing. Mom paused on the threshold, her back still turned to me, and repeated 1 week before closing the door. I stood there, in the middle of the living room I had painstakingly brought back to life, feeling like the walls were closing in on me. The pride I had felt just a few months earlier, when Mom praised my renovation, now turned to ash. Maybe they expected me to sob all night in despair, but instead, I picked up my phone and started searching for rentals. By midnight, I had found something that looked ideal. A 1-bedroom modern unit just a few blocks from my job. The rent was higher than I had been paying Mom, but I no longer cared. Early the next morning, I took a sick day from work for the first time in 3 years. By 9, I'd toured the new place, and by 10, I'd signed the contract and paid the deposit. The landlord, a matter-of-fact woman named Janet, raised an eyebrow when I asked if I could move in immediately. A plush gray couch perfect for movie nights, a solid wooden dining table that could seat 6, and a soft rug that brought the entire living area together. It took me half a year of weekends and late evenings, but when I finally stood back and gazed around that finished apartment, I felt an overpowering surge of pride that nearly brought tears to my eyes. I had done it myself. When Mom came over to see the end result, I felt unexpectedly anxious. She wandered through each room slowly, running her hand along the brand new kitchen counters, studying the carefully chosen lamps, and pausing at the subtle pattern of the new bedroom wallpaper. "Amber," she said at last, turning toward me, "this is outstanding." I nearly fell over in shock. Mom wasn't exactly known for handing out compliments freely, especially when it came to me. But there she was, smiling in a genuine, impressed way. "Did you do all this on your own?" she asked, pointing to the living room furniture. I nodded, determined not to look too smug. "I got a lot of help from YouTube tutorials. It's beautiful," she told me. And then she did something she hadn't done in years. She gave me a real hug, not the typical quick, perfunctory version, but a real embrace. 2 weeks later, I arrived at a different family dinner, practically skipping with excitement. I had been promoted at work to senior account manager with a pay raise and my own small team. I could hardly wait to share the news. "Mom, Dad," I said when there was a pause in the conversation, "I've got great news. I was just promoted." Mom barely raised her eyes from her plate. "Oh, that's nice, dear," she commented in an absent tone. She turned to Dad, lowering her voice. "Have you heard anything about Bart today?" And then began the main topic of the evening. It turned out that Bart's courier business had hit a major snag. A bigger, better-funded company had come to town with an advanced tracking app and lower prices, and Bart's customers were leaving, in droves like rats fleeing a sinking ship. "We're going to help him," Dad announced, pushing his plate aside. "We've decided to take out a loan." I nearly choked on my glass of water. "A loan? Maybe this is a sign that he should try something else instead of competing head-on with that bigger company. Starting fresh might be better than throwing more money at a losing battle." An almost deafening silence fell. Mom and Dad exchanged a long, disappointed look. "You know nothing about business, Amber," Dad said, a stern edge in his voice. "You've always clung to safe office jobs. Your brother is an entrepreneur. He takes real risks." "It's what families do," Mom added pointedly. "We help each other." I opened my mouth, then snapped it shut. Why bother arguing? They'd already made up their minds. I could have announced I'd discovered the cure for cancer, and they still would have been more concerned about Bart's fleet of vans. The following 6 months were like watching a slow-motion car crash. Every so often, Mom would call me to update me on Bart's predicament, even though I never asked. The loan my parents had taken out went toward purchasing new vans for Bart and cutting his prices, but it wasn't enough. The rival company expanded, adding more tech-savvy features, and continued scooping up Bart's customers. Finally, I got the call I'd been bracing for. "Your brother's company has gone under," Mom said tersely. "He and Sarah have moved in with us until they can get back on their feet." I clutched my phone, remembering the silent prediction I'd made at dinner half a year earlier. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, truly unsure what else to offer. "They're sleeping in your old bedroom," Mom continued. "Sarah is taking it especially hard. She's always been particular about keeping up appearances." Of course, I knew how Sarah was. My sister-in-law had always looked down on me for having a boring office job, constantly making sure everyone knew she was married to a CEO. I wondered how she was coping with living under my parents' roof. That weekend, I showed up for another family dinner, telling myself it was no different from any other. Yet from the moment I stepped inside, I felt the tension in the air, as thick as tar. Bart lay sprawled on the living room couch, scrolling through his phone, barely looking up. Sarah sat in the armchair, back straight as though it were a throne, her designer handbag placed neatly at her feet. She shot me one of her trademark looks, the kind that silently says you're something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. "Dinner's ready," Mom called, and we filed into the dining room. I should have known it wouldn't be a peaceful meal. Bart launched into a well-rehearsed monologue about his business troubles before I'd even picked up my fork. "Everything was going great," he insisted, waving a steak knife around. I have always been the practical one in my family. While my older brother Bart was busy chasing his dreams of becoming an ultra-successful entrepreneur, I set my sights on working my way steadily up the corporate ladder. Over time, that methodical approach finally paid off. I landed a position at Cowford & Associates with a salary so generous it made my previous job seem like I had been earning spare change. The only catch was the commute. 2 hours each way, meaning 4 hours a day spent traveling to and from work. After 2 weeks of that grueling schedule, I knew I needed an apartment closer to the office, one One Saturday, I went to my parents' house for our usual family dinner. Mom was in the kitchen, stirring something that smelled mouth-watering, while Dad sat in his favorite armchair, absorbed in the newspaper. It felt just like all the Saturday evenings I remembered from childhood. "How's the new job going, sweetheart?" Mom asked, placing a steaming casserole on the table. "Actually, really well," I replied, helping her set out the plates and silverware. "The biggest issue is the commute. I'm looking for a new place to rent, closer to the office." That was when I noticed my parents exchanging one of those glances they had perfected over their 30 years of marriage. Mom wiped her hands on her apron and took a seat at the table. "You know, Amber," she said, "we might have a solution for you. Do you remember Grandma Helen's old apartment, the one I inherited? Our tenants moved out last week, and it's literally a 5-minute walk from your new job." I nearly dropped my fork. Of course I remembered that apartment. I had spent countless weekends there when Grandma Helen was alive. It was a cozy, 2-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood, complete with big windows and a small balcony where Grandma used to grow her beloved petunias. "How much would the rent be?" I tried not to sound too eager, even though my heart was pounding with excitement. Mom mentioned a figure that made my eyes go wide. It was practically half of what other rentals went for in that area. "We'd naturally give you a family discount," she added with a smile. "I'll take it," I said immediately, without even attempting to negotiate. The location was perfect and the price unbeatable. "Then it's settled," said Dad, finally, looking up from his newspaper. "Oh, by the way, did you hear about the latest with your brother? He's just secured 3 big corporate clients for his courier company. He's really doing well in the delivery business." And just like that, the conversation shifted to its usual topic, Bart's accomplishments. I sat there pushing the food around on my plate, nodding whenever it seemed appropriate, while my parents went on and on about how their son was becoming this unstoppable entrepreneur. It was always the same. Bart was the golden child, the risk-taker, the one who dared to dream. I was simply Amber. Moving day turned out to be surprisingly quick. The real shock hit me when I first walked into Grandma Helen's apartment, carrying the initial box of my things. Let's just say the previous tenants hadn't exactly treated the place like it was their own. The wallpaper was old and peeling away at the corners. There were odd stains on the ceiling, and the sole piece of furniture left behind was an ancient couch that looked as if it had survived several wars. That evening, I sat cross-legged on that worn-out couch, the only seating available, and called Mom. "Hey, Mom, would you be all right if I made a few renovations?" Sure, honey," she replied, sounding distracted, likely watching one of her cooking shows. "Just don't paint it any of those bright neon colors that are in fashion these days. You know how I feel about them." I actually laughed. "Mom, have you ever seen me wear anything louder than navy blue? Don't worry, I'm thinking neutrals and earthy tones." That very night, I dove into the depths of the internet, checking design blogs and Pinterest boards for inspiration. I put together an entire mood board with my chosen vision: warm grays, soft beiges, and maybe a hint of a deep, rich blue. My plan was for the overall style to be subtle yet elegant, cozy yet sophisticated, just the way I liked it. The next few months were a whirlwind of holding down my busy job and tackling the remodeling after work. Each day I'd come home from the office, change into old clothes, and get straight to stripping wallpaper or painting walls. I discovered the hard way that just one more coat often ends up meaning 2 more coats. On weekends, I'd go furniture shopping. I spent hours at home improvement stores, trying out sofas, measuring spaces, and comparing prices for everything from cabinets to light fixtures. Gradually, I turned that rundown apartment into a real home.